Hello, everyone. Today is September 30th, 2021. I'm here with Ryon Shamloo. Ryon is an information security consultant. Thanks for coming on the podcast, Ryon.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me on.
Welcome. So, what does information security consultant do on a day-to-day basis?
Okay, yeah, so I think it's a very broad term, but specifically what my firm specializes in is compliance, mainly compliance. With the team I'm on, I do like IT auditing and compliance. It's very broad in the sense that there's not just like one or two or three compliance frameworks. We have like literally a handful, probably like 20 plus that are pretty like similar, but you kind of just like go through each of them, and depending on who the client is and what they want, you basically interview the C-suite and bottom, like from the C-suite down to even sometimes like HR, and depending on the audit, finance, or like maybe low-level IT personnel. But we basically just interview everyone at the company, gather their documents, their policies, their procedures, and if need be, we'll watch them go through these procedures and make sure they align with these documents they have written. And once we're not like with them, after we gather all the evidence and have assessed everything, we go through and we start noting if there's any findings, which would be exceptions or things out of the norm that don't fit with the compliance framework, or if we personally believe that it may not be a good information security practice, we'll note that as well. But basically, we just do audits. Sounds a lot cooler than it actually is. We just interview people, but I think that's the best part of it, is just meeting the different people. And yeah, I mean, you'll see some insane things in the job. I think that's why I really like it, is you get exposed to so many different clients and so many different fields and how they all approach information security, which is like its own thing. But each company, regardless of what industry they're in, they have to align by these same standards. It's interesting to see how they like utilize their resources to like accomplish that task. And some of it's eye-opening. Due to some like NDAs, I can't like say much like specific clients, but there's some clients that I have that range from like really like Fortune 500 to like small companies that will have like really mature security programs, which are really good, and then they'll have really those in their infancy stage where I personally would not use the product. But I mean, that's why I have a job. So if everyone did it well, I wouldn't have a job. So I enjoy it, but mostly I just do IT auditing to dumb it down.
Okay. So, when you say you wouldn't use the product, that's because you've audited this product and you know that the procedures aren't aligning to the compliance framework that's necessary.
Yeah,
There's
so
vulnerabilities.
definitely, yeah, if there are vulnerabilities in like our line of work, when we like say vulnerabilities, it mostly comes from like scans or penetration testing. So that's more along like when people think of hackers and like using code to essentially like break into a network somehow, drop a payload, whatever. That is essentially what like vulnerabilities surround. But I think we call them more compliance gaps or findings, where they're not necessarily like going to give a malicious actor the ability to ruin an entire company, but it may cause like data breaches, people's personal information being put out on the internet where it shouldn't be. It could be sold. Personal healthcare information is a big one. We deal with HIPAA a lot. People's healthcare information is very valuable. I believe when I was in school in my IT auditing class, my professor was saying each social security number can go up to like $15 on the black market. So it's a very
Wow.
lucrative industry, being like breaching big organizations and leaking their databases, and it happens all the time. I think there's a website, it's called haveibeenpwned.com, and if you put in like your email, it shows how many database breaches it's been in, and if you put in your password, it tells you how many times that password shows up in leaked lists. And I think one of my old passwords, when I wasn't really like aware of this, was in over 4,000 leaks. So when I was wondering why all my accounts were getting accessed by people where it's like, oh, someone from China or Russia just accessed your account, is this you? I'm like, no, obviously it's not me, but how is that possible? It's because they're scraping this data from these leaks and using it against you.
Yes, that is something like that happened to me too. Actually, UCSD was hacked,
Yeah, the
and
UC system.
was the whole UC system hacked?
My friend who's in Santa Cruz, his account was hacked, and I think there's one other. I think UCI as well. So I think it's mainly UC wide. I'm sure it was just a majority of them. I don't know if it was every single one, but I've heard almost every single UC that I've talked to has mentioned some sort of data leak, and that's because schools are very vulnerable. They have all your healthcare information, all your sensitive information. It's since for the most part, especially state schools, they have a lot of it's related to the government, so they have a lot of government information as well. So the schools are a very easy target to go after.
Wow, that's they are an easy target, and they hold so much information on so many people, and I don't feel like they have the most secure, you know, information security system available to them. How do you then go about, now that you have this knowledge, you're gained, a degree in information security. What was your degree in?
It's computer information systems, and then there's like roots. Mine was information security.
Okay. Like, what practices have you changed now that you have your position? You can understand, flaws with, what do you call them? Gaps?
Findings or exceptions, gaps. Yeah.
Okay.
There's so many different names, but risks.
Risks. How have you changed your acts to minimize your own risk?
Yeah. So I think one of the biggest things that I have done, and I think a lot of people do this because nowadays we're forced to do it, is two-factor authentication. But you'd be honestly surprised how much of a lifesaver that is. There's so many people online that will be on like forum boards or whatever, on like financial boards, talking about how they lost their funds due to unauthorized access. And everyone asks, did you have two-factor authentication? And most of the time they don't. And I like that every company is kind of like enforcing that now. When you sign up for things, can you put your phone number in? But phone number is not a good method of two-factor authentication, because something that's been proliferating recently is called SIM swapping. So people will impersonate you to your like telecommunications provider and essentially get emulate your SIM card to an extent, and then they'll basically have your phone number. And then from there, if they log in and it sends like a text to that phone number, they have it, so they can just get in without the system knowing that it's someone else. So I recommend using like Google Authenticator, Okta, Duo. There's so many two-factor authentication things, but they're like so commonplace. But there's some of them are just push, like they send you a push to your phone, and you just hit like accept. Other ones give you a code or a one-time password, and you input those, and they expire after a while. So if someone like looked over your shoulder, they couldn't like go back and like put it in themselves. So it's time restricted. But yeah, I think on top of that, even the ones that are like push related, I have clients where some people who are not as technically inclined within the company, if someone was trying to access their account and they had the push thing enabled and it pushes it to their phone, sometimes they'll just hit accept out of habit. They don't even realize they are the ones who like they didn't even authorize that. So I always recommend like the one-time passwords, or kind of the number sequence they give you for a short period of time. I think that's probably the best way to go about it, on top of obviously having a strong password. I think everyone should know that by now. Now, I think a lot of, they do a field validation where you have like one special character, one uppercase, some numerical values. And that's based off of like rainbow attacks, dictionary attacks, all these different kinds of like password brute forcing methods, and what already exists. The way they run, you kind of have to think like an AI or like a robot that's being programmed to do something. And like what might seem like a hard password to you, that's just like a bunch of random words, whatever, is actually really simple to like an AI or program that's written to pick up these common phrases. That's why we always recommend the most like as random as you can get. Like if you do like go on password generators like LastPass, or even within like Gmail and all these things, they have these own native password generators now. You'll see they're just really long strings of extremely random numbers and symbols and letters, and that's because the more the less likely that they are to be together. Obviously, the harder it's going to be because I think each character, I forget the exact number, but I think if you have if you follow those steps that it says to do with like the 8 minimum characters and then the special whatever, once you start going to like 9, 10 characters, I believe it starts getting to the point where it would outpace your life for them to actually try to brute force that. So the only way for them to do that would be social engineering or like keylogging, like stealing your password, but they're not going to be able to brute force that. Luckily, we have password timeouts and account freezes too. So if you try too many times, it'll freeze your account. So this is how we prevent brute forcing as well. But yeah, ultimately password security and account login information, especially for your financial and sensitive information, is crucial. And that's one of the things I definitely look with like a more stringent eye now.
And these are the topics that you speak about with your clients too, like enabling these sort of security features for their systems, and if they don't have it already in place.
Yeah, so a lot of the frameworks I work with, it's one of the requirements is we check, do you have two-factor authentication? Typically, this goes along with VPN access. A lot of them you need two-factor or multi-factor authentication to access the VPNs. And yeah, we just have them, they'll screen share if we're doing a remote assessment, or if we're in person, we'll just like see them do it. They'll just show us like, okay, this is like the program we have, this is the two-factor authentication, okay, whatever. But I have seen clients that just don't have it. And it's not to say that they're like, it's an insecure environment simply just because of that, but it is something that it's so simple that I think everyone should implement it. And if you're not at this point, I definitely recommend you should, like rhetorically speaking to everyone.
Yes, especially, companies. I mean, individuals will get targeted too, but if you're a company, I mean, people know you have money, people know you do something that's worth value, so you're an easy, like, bigger target, and there's more online, there's a lot more places, I think, for a company to get exposed than a single individual, although that's still easily exposed when people start, like going back to what we talked about with password thing, like 10 years ago when I was in school, I had the same password for everything, and then so UC San Diego gets hacked. That password I used was the password that I had for everything. So like, they had a password, for my Chase bank account, my everything. And so now I don't have the same password for anything. And I know, like, it's funny because you spoke about social engineering, which we're not going to get socially engineered into giving up our information. I talked to a girl who a few weeks ago logged into her ex-boyfriend's Instagram because he uses the same password for multiple different accounts. And it's like, that's a practice we have to stop immediately.
Absolutely. And I'm honestly guilty of it myself. I definitely, if not using the exact same password in the same capacity, I definitely have like a root phrases or root like sequences that I like morph around that is just easy to remember. But the reason I'm kind of all right with doing that is I'll only do that for very like things that aren't very like sensitive. There's nothing like that I could really care if it was hacked. But at the same time, if you have two-factor authentication, it's not impossible, but it's very it's not feasible at all to happen if you really have it set up properly. As long as you have that second factor only able to be accessed by you, there's really not much to be worried about. If anything, I think the only benefit I could say of using a password that's been leaked is, I mean, I don't even know if this is a benefit, it's just interesting, is you'll know when people try to like break into your account because you'll start getting those notifications and you're like, oh, that wasn't me. I think that kind of when you see those, it gives you kind of like, it's an eye-opening experience. It's like, oh wow, like look at all these people trying to log into my like account, like what's going on. I think I want to say it's YouTube back in the day. They were one of the first ones I used to get emails of that were saying, oh, is this IP address you? And it'd be like Shanghai or like Kiev, Russia, like just random things. And it's like, no. So I don't know if it's a VPN, like, because you can't really tell, is it a VPN or not? There are ways to kind of like look up the IP address and determine if it's actually coming from like a computer or like a server, many different ways. But ultimately, most of the time they come from these countries that are known for proliferating cybercrime. And I think we're not really out of the woods as far as that goes either. We have our own fair share of like information security hackers and people who just maliciously attack organizations. But at the same time, I think we have been the most proactive in charging these people. I mean, they work in the NSA. A lot of these people who work in the NSA and high up at these security firms are those who were on the quote unquote dark side. They were black hat hackers. Those are the most brilliant minds. To be able to find these vulnerabilities, you have to have like such a knowledge, and you're not just going to find that through a job opening. Like there's I don't know if you've, I honestly heard of this recently. I think it's called Cicada or something about Cicada, but it's basically like an organization that you have to solve all these insane, like partially social engineering, mostly cryptography and like, for lack of a better term, like hacking challenges. And it's very secretive. And basically after you complete all these challenges, they basically invite you to the organization. So there's a lot of companies that are like really secretive in that matter. I want to say maybe like what is MI6 or something, like a lot of those CIA, those kind of organizations that are very high profile, but very secretive. They do those, but no one really knows because they're not going to, it's not advertised by them. It's just, it'll show up in your inbox one day and it's like something that's just intriguing, but you have no clue what it is. And then you go down that rabbit hole. It's actually become kind of like a fad to an extent over COVID. A lot of people on the internet started doing it. I honestly forget what it's called. My coworker showed me it not too long ago, but it's like there's a bunch of these kind of like, I'd say games is what you'd call them, but they're just riddles and puzzles and things that can lead to like real world implications. Like they'll put IP addresses on a telephone pole in like Poland, and like literally people will go there and get that IP address, and like it's just crazy. Like those are people who will do anything to find the most brilliant minds, and we'll never truly know who they are because those people are the best at concealing their identity. That's one of the biggest things nowadays, is keeping our privacy and our identity on the internet a secret. It was, I don't want to say it was easier in the past, but there was less people looking for it in the past. So you had to have a certain level of knowledge to be able to obtain all this information. But now, in the world of automation, all these scripting languages, people write tools to literally do anything. You could put in someone's like email address, and it'll find places that like different accounts they have relating to email address, and from there you can do yada yada whatever. But there's too much technology now to where we really can't ignore this factor of privacy. Information kind of was the most valuable asset in the past decade. I believe this decade, privacy and like our own like anonymity is like the real valuable entity we have now. It's the biggest asset, and it's the most at danger. It's scarce. It's everywhere now. Especially in California, we have the CCPA, the California Privacy Act, that if you go on websites, it'll tell you, hey, like, do you accept these cookies, or like accept all or whatever, and you can change like the cookies on the website. That is because of a law that we passed here. In Europe, they did it first, the GDPR, I believe, and then New York has something coming out as well. But our privacy really is invaded on a lot, and a lot of these apps like Instagram and things that keep a lot of your information, you actually go on like the settings and you go to like privacy or whatever, they have to legally have an option to send you your data, like what they store. You have the legal obligation in California to get a printout of that, and they'll send you an email with all your metadata and everything they keep. And they make it sound like, oh, it's just like, they're not really like putting out your personal information, but when you actually do get that information, you look and it's like, oh, they have like my address, my IP address, my name, like people near me, like it's crazy. Like they have everything. And almost every single app does. I think the most malicious app that people don't realize is insanely malicious is TikTok. The license agreement and the like privacy breaches it has is just unbelievable. Where I don't know if this is exactly how it's written, but it's basically to the point where they are able to access anything on your phone, like any passwords on different things, any activity you do on your phone, you're essentially giving that information to them. Especially with location services, a lot of the times these things like, hey, do you want to like share your location, or it's like allow while using the app or never. If you do allow always, it will always have your location. And there's the U.S. government, one of the defense like entities of it actually purchases this information from applications that are dying. So let's say you had Flappy Bird on your phone and you haven't touched it in 2 years, and no one's really using that app anymore. They're not getting any ad revenue. The company's struggling that runs it. They're looking for any avenue of financial incentive, and they will sell your data to these larger organizations or people who are willing to contract them for like quite a good price. And it's to the point where they won't say no. And I believe they said this entity of the government has the most updated information within 7 seconds. They know your last location and like what you were accessing, things like that. So when people are worried about being tracked, like you're always being tracked, like not even trying to be paranoid. It's just like logically we are being tracked, and you can just read like the privacy settings in your phone to even know that. So at the same time, if everyone's being watched, is it really like everyone's being breached, or is it just everyone's on the same level? So people view it really differently, where it's like, at what point is it infringing on our like personal rights? But at the same time, we also are the ones who like had to, allow this. Like, I think things aren't just like imposed on people, especially not in this country, by like force. I think people might think that to an extent, but ultimately it comes down to you have to accept these things. These license agreements, you have to hit accept. You have to sign them. They might be the most malicious, like blood-sucking thing you've ever read in your life, but you're the one hitting agree. It's unfortunate that no one wants to read 300 pages of jargon, but that's how they get away with it. It's because no one has the time, and no one's going to hire a lawyer to read the iOS 15 user license agreement.
No. Well, someone might, but most people aren't. And those are the people that are going to get taken advantage of.
Absolutely.
Like, yeah, and like you said, it's hard, what is private? Are we ever in privacy? Like, I've heard our location can be sold out by apps at any time, and then personal data on social media can be sold out. So it's like, how do you stay, comfortable, relevant, make sure that you're truly, do you think are truly sensitive data, like when we get into bank records and financial things, how do you feel about that? Crypto is obviously on its way in.
Yeah. So people like to think that government entities are like the most secure, but they're actually the least secure, because the people who are good at that job, information security, work in the private sector. And nation states and state governments and things, local governments, things of the sort, they are very vulnerable. Like, they are really high priority targets by these hacker individuals, because they know it's a low hanging fruit. The people who work there really, like, it's a lot of bureaucracy and red tape in these government entities, so they can't really, like, on a drop of a dime, they can't just like get something done. I honestly do believe if someone was intelligent enough and had the right like resources, they could get almost everything about you that's ever touched the internet. For the most part, especially if like, even if you look on like your web browser at the top left, there's like a little like a lock, and that's if like the website's in HTTPS, which means it's secure, and it uses like web certificates and uses encryption to send your data. So if you're ever going on a website and it's telling you to put your card information in, like a checkout, and you don't see that lock or you don't see the HTTPS, that means your information is not being encrypted and that essentially in plain text. So if someone wants to intercept the packets or like your communication, they could actually read exactly what's going through that. So that's why we mandate for all payments industries, they have high levels of encryption on these gateways, where we actually hold them to really high standards. That's partially one of the frameworks I work with is PCI, payments card, whatever. I forget the exact acronym, but it's basically like companies that accept cardholder information. They have to follow very stringent rules. But there are some that don't go through this regulation. It's not like a legal thing. They won't like go to prison for not doing it. It's just a matter of a lot of their clients and people that will want to use their service will demand it. They want to have that attestation of like security that, hey, have you been audited? Can we see this document to show that like you're good? So always look out for websites that just seem shady. I think it's just so easy nowadays for people to go on like typo squatting, which is just you put like one wrong letter in the name of like a website, a common website, and then they have a phishing site. It looks identical, but it's just like one different letter. Or people will send you links and you can spoof the link where it might say, oh, Instagram.com, this person sent me a link from Instagram.com. You click in it, it really just redirects you somewhere else. A lot of people don't realize that, and they don't even look at the search bar and they're like, oh wait, this is just Instagram. But no, it's some insane something else that is literally just a phishing website. And especially with COVID-19, that was one of the biggest things that happened. Phishing scams and vishing scams, which are like voice.
Okay, dude. Now my AirPods just keep randomly connecting and they're not even near me.
Oh, dang.
Yeah.
I've had that too with AirPods.
Yeah. It's weird. It's like literally it's closed. It's not even open.
Are they the new ones?
No, these are like the old ones. Here, I'm just gonna throw them far away so they can't even connect. Okay.
I heard the old ones were better than the new ones, but
yeah, I think my brother has the new ones, and I think he likes them because certain people like the ear shape. The old ones didn't fit properly in people's ears, and they would cause like a lot of ear damage. But these new ones have like adjustable, like foam things. But
got it.
Back to the topic of like our personal information. Certain companies are willing to take that stand. They're willing to be like, no, we're not going to give away your personal information. Other companies are just like, they're like, sure, yeah, literally pay me. It's the bottom line. As long as they're not breaking like a law, they don't care. And there aren't many laws that say they can't use your information. And a lot of times they're just like, oh, can we use your information for like improving the application? Or like we're just using this data to improve like things around us. We're not going to sell your information. Unless it's like really written in like a legal form, like they can. There's nothing stopping them. Like who's saying they can't? You don't even know what they have of yours. They don't specifically tell you unless you request it. So yeah, I think every single person is vulnerable to some extent. I think it's a childish thing to assume that you can be completely off the grid and completely have your information not accessible. I think it comes down to just risk management of your own personal information. It's like, okay, what can I control? Like there's certain things I can't control at all, no matter how much I want to do. I'm already in too deep. Maybe if I was born like yesterday and now I had this knowledge, I could go about my life in a way that wouldn't release this information. But since we're already too deep in that, and everything's already out on the internet, not deletable, it's immutable on the internet for the most part, especially with these like old websites that just aren't ran anymore by people. They're just sitting, they're just floating in cyberspace, this information that some people can just tap into if they have like old security protocols on those websites or whatnot. But I think one of the best things we can do, I try to use as much as possible, is have a VPN. I think it's like oversaid, but at the same time, it's like it can't be oversaid. Using a VPN is very important in the sense that you can get so much information from someone's IP address, where you can trace exactly their location. You can do a lot to people's IP addresses. You can actually do a lot of malicious things like distributed denial of service attacks. We could flood their router with packets and essentially shut out their internet. I've had my fair share of that, like way back in the day when I was just always, I guess for lack of a better term, I was screwing around with like black hat things when I was a kid because I thought it was interesting. There's like websites dedicated to a lot of like malicious security tools, but they're more so for education But there are people on there who literally they are strictly there to sell information and do like very illegal things. But a lot of these people who do like the white hat hacking, who are kind of like testing to make sure it's secure, they were in those shoes at one point. It's it's akin to giving someone all this power and telling them not to like abuse it. Um, you have the ability to maybe hack into like someone's bank account, take the money, and you knew there was no way at all they could trace it, like not a chance. If you knew you could get away with something, it starts eating at you where it's like, what's actually stopping you besides your own morals? And if you abandon those morals, there's really nothing holding you back. Because if you know you can get away with it, there's no legal implications. So yeah, VPN encrypts all your connection to like the internet. People can't trace you as well. It is possible if um, they have the right tools and they're doing like network sniffing, things like that. But VPN is a very basic level thing. I think everyone should get. There's a lot of free ones that just aren't that good, but I recommend people. It's like $5 a month or 15 for like a good one, and it's worth it. There's a lot of things you can do. Like there's a lot of places and like services on the internet that you can't access as a U.S. citizen for whatever reason. If you have a VPN that puts you in Switzerland, you can access those. And it sounds like it just seems like a joke. It's like, oh, I just click this button and all of a sudden I can just pretend I'm from somewhere else. But it really works like that. And it's that simple to just mask your information to that extent. That's one of them. Another one is what we mentioned with the whole secure websites with the lock for the HTTPS uses secure socket layer SSL or TLS. It's just transmission encryption. Just as your information's in transit, like moving from point A to point B, it's encrypted. This could be the VPN does that as well because it like if you have an end-to-end VPN, it tunnels it. So like corporations, when they have VPNs, you have to connect to work. They usually have like a VPN tunnel. Um, mostly all encryption techniques that revolve around like data being transmitted use something similar. And there's really only so much we can do. Like that's what more can you do besides encrypt it? They really can't do much with encrypted information, especially if we're using like a reputable encryption algorithm, which actually kind of brings me to the point. The most widely used and widely like known as being secure encryption algorithm has the Sha algorithm, secure hash algorithm, and it's actually developed by the NSA. So we're kind of just putting all our faith in the NSA, and a lot of people worldwide are. The only reason I say there really is no definitive way to know that it's 100% secure is these these hashing algorithms, for example, are only as good as long as they don't have a single flaw. So if they have one flaw, so one thing where two things have the same, two things have a different input but the same output. If you hash them, like these use the same hash function on two different things and they give you the same output, that's what we call a collision. So that means from there you can reverse engineer the entire algorithm and basically figure out everything from there. So even if you have one collision, um, the whole thing's ruined. So there's been like MD5, I think is one of the hash algorithms in the past that's very easy. Like everyone figured that out. But yeah, we're putting our trust in the NSA, and who's to say they don't have a back door, that they don't have like one collision that they personally know that's just so insanely like random and like so many characters long that we just don't know. So that's something I always talk to my friend, one of my coworkers. He's very like into cryptography, like that's his thing. He's a math. He's getting his math PhD at one point. But when he was telling me about it, like he kind of explained encryption and cryptography to me uh, the best, and it's essentially just we're trusting a lot of just math that a lot of us don't even know. Like I personally don't know exactly the math behind it, and the whole point is no one is supposed to know, because if you knew the math, you could reverse engineer it. So it's just a black box like algorithm. We have no clue what it is. We can guess and just assume things, but we will never know because two outputs will never be the same, and it's made to be impossible to know. So someone knows. Like that's the way I look at it. It's like someone knows, and whether that be they know the entire thing or just like the inputs, and then there's a random number verification portions of that they can't predict or not. But there are people who had to construct this, and I think that in itself will always be an inherent risk. There's going to be people who know a lot more than others. I think it's fair to say we trust them because a lot of people are like, oh, how can we trust this? Well, if we didn't trust them, almost everything in the world we use that uses hashing would be screwed. Almost everything uses the same hashing algorithm. So we have to trust it.
SHA-256.
Yeah, SHA-256 is the most commonly used. And then we have AES 128-bit for data at rest. There's just tons of different encryption protocols and cryptography methods, but I think it's at the point where common folk are not going to be able to create their own algorithms for this. It's just way too like over everyone's head, even mine. It's just we have to trust it, and that underlying level of trust we have to put in is like a level of risk we have to accept, and I personally accept it. It's risk. Everything, like one of the most prevalent laws of risk is it can never be zero. You can just mitigate and lower risk, but you can never get rid of it. So it's all about finding how much risk each person individually is willing to take. There's some people who aren't even willing to have like their name on the internet at all, and like they use pseudonyms. They will never use like maybe they won't open a bank account or something. Like there's just certain things that people, they're super paranoid. Um, I wouldn't say paranoid. I'd say they're just very like aware of what it is. And I think the reason we think they're paranoid is because they believe they can have a different outcome and like not be affected by this, when those of us who really have this understanding realize it's almost impossible to live a normal and fruitful life and not be affected by this in one way or another. So ignorance is always bliss with a lot of things, but especially with security. There's a certain level where after you're like, okay, I have my two-factor, I have my proper like VPN, things like that. At a certain point, you just need to like ignore all the high-level stuff because it's just gonna be a rabbit hole of just unbelievable despair once you realize all these things that are out there. And like I think at some point, like personally, my information was out everywhere on like a paste bin, because like it's really simple back in the day to like get this information. They just had my IP address and that's all they needed. They could get everything from there. They could find my email address. From there, they found like a database that leaked the password. I had the same password. They used that. Maybe I had a recovery email, and that recovery email used a different password that they found. Or like through social engineering, they knew, like, let's say my password was football1, for example. They're like, oh, this guy loves football, and football is one of the most common passwords in the world. So it's just like, okay, football1, literally, I think in like half a second, a brute forcing system would figure that out as a password. Or like even password 123, like people put like the things we joke about. They're like, oh, like, there's no way anyone does that. No, people do that. Um,
Yeah, they do.
yeah, no, like people like literally where it's like, oh, they put their first pet's name and then numbers, or like their last name, or like the year they were born will be the end of it. It's just like predictable things. And I believe when I was like studying for like one of these certifications, it said the best way for like to have a password without it being generated by like a computer was getting a book and like having a certain page and word on that book be like some part of the password, and like it's written nowhere. So you should never write your passwords down. That's one of the biggest things I actually look for when we audit people, is are there sticky notes next to their computers that have these passwords or usernames and stuff. Is the worst thing you can ever do, because you're just trusting
Right
everyone
there.
around you. Yeah, everyone's
Yeah.
around there, and you don't, it's just not reasonable. There's so many other ways to hide it. If you are going to write it down on something, put in like a safe, like people do with their like cryptocurrency wallets or whatever, these long seed phrases of encrypted um, like information. You write it down and you literally just hide it in a vault or whatever. But for the most part, people are not going to be doing that for their passwords. That's where we just have to realize, how much are we willing to accept? Are we willing to accept the risk of having a weak password, or are we going to accept the inconvenience of having a 40-character long password that we can't write down, that we have to like memorize, or like we might forget? It's, you can't have your cake and eat it too. There's just, you have to find that middle ground, and each person has their own level of risk they're willing to take. I think individual people, it's hard to protect their privacy as like an organization. That's just something on an individual level they have to do. So yeah, I can help like organizations with masking that data and whatnot, but I necessarily can't advise individuals, because there's so many different things they put their information out there for. There are some, and a lot of companies try to take advantage of this. They have these services where it's like, oh, we'll remove your information off the internet. Like, no, they're literally just stealing your information because you put in your information that you want removed. So they have it. So you have to be very careful what you type and who you trust. And one of the basic underlying like tenets of cryptography is trust nobody. You should trust literally no one. Don't even trust yourself. Like, have everything be so trustless that you can have zero knowledge. That's one of the biggest things cryptography right now is zero knowledge proofs. That's like a huge thing, trustlessness. And honestly,
zero
it's
knowledge proof.
zero knowledge proof, like ZKPs, I think is like what they're called. I don't know too much about them. That's actually what my coworker who's into cryptography. He kind of like explained them to me. But it's a method of being able to prove that someone else knows something that you know without them giving up any information. So it's like the name says, zero knowledge. So you have no knowledge, but you're able to prove something, even though you have zero knowledge of the other person. There is like some intermediary thing that it's the craziest thing ever. Honestly, it's pretty insane, and that stuff's just way over my head. Where it's like most people would not understand that. I don't even. You have to be really deep into the math and cryptography to understand it, and that's why I think that's a field we really don't have enough people in. I think when we think of math, it's like, okay, you're just doing theory, things like that. But I think one of the most applicable things in math right now is cryptography. So I think it's a growing field for sure, especially with the implementation of a lot of these corporations using uh, like blockchain solutions that have cryptography inherently in them, or just using like cryptography on everything to mask their information. That due to COVID, everything's remote now. Everything's more susceptible to malicious attacks. I don't know the exact statistic, but I believe it like went up like 70 something percent the amount of cybercrime. Um, I believe right before COVID, one of the biggest things everyone was kind of eyeing for was ransomware attacks. Those are very, very prevalent back in the day. I mean, they still are today, but I think it's more so everyone realizes that like they exist. It's not like something that was super like kept under the rug. And everyone knows you turn on your computer one day and it just has like a red screen and it tells you to send Bitcoin to this address or all your information's gone. You probably downloaded some malware. And something, an interesting fact about ransomware that one of my professors in college, he spoke on. He's like this like a little backstory about this guy without saying his name. He is one of the people who helped create IPv6. Like he's like insane. He has over like 400 certifications. This guy's crazy. But when he said this to me, I knew he wasn't lying because this guy is super credible and he's been quite near like everywhere. But he told me that most companies that get hit with ransomware, they pay it. They don't report it or anything. They pay it simply because by law, if they report it to like a federal agency or like some crime organization, investigating organization, they have to release that information to their public that, hey, we got breached, or hey, all this information's out there. And that's a huge reputational damage. So sometimes they're just like, whatever, we'll just pay this person the millions of dollars, whatever, and uh, we'll let it slide. And they'll try to like fix it after the fact internally. Sometimes it never gets fixed, and they just come back like the next year and do the same thing. And it happens, and it gets to the point where like they're like, all right, fine, like we have to go to the authorities at this point. So all the ones we see and we hear of is honestly just the tip of the iceberg. There's so much more under that we have no clue about. Um, that's honestly quite scary because that means our information is out there. We just don't even know it's out there because it's not even listed in like a leaked database or anything. So I mean, that's another reason why it's like you just got to assume everything's already out there. It's just simply it's not feasible for it not to be there. Just with Murphy's law and just statistical like a logic, it's bound to happen, and it's there. So I think you got to look at it from okay, it's there. How are we gonna reduce the impact on that? Whether it be from now, everything that we know is out there, don't use it, or if it's something you can't change, like your name. I mean, you can change your name, but like, let's be real. If it's something like that isn't your name or like something that's inherent within
like
you.
a social security number.
Yeah, social security number. Honestly, I understand why it's like very important to secure them. But at the same time, social security numbers are so easy to get, and they're just
So
everywhere.
vulnerable everywhere. You have to input it for almost anything.
Exactly, because it has to do with everything to do with taxes, anything that's has to do with your legal implications. If they want to verify who you are, you have to put your social security number. And honestly, this is something that I always thought was interesting. Is if you're someone who, for whatever reason, doesn't have a social security number or like an identification number, whether it be you're like on a visa or like hypothetically illegally immigrated here, you probably have a better chance of being secure than other people because you don't have this sensitive information. So it's kind of crazy to think about, but those people who have the least access to our infrastructure and internet are the most secure, quite literally off the grid. And our grid itself is like hypothetical grid is we're trusting that. We're like, okay, our internet providers, how do we know they're not owned by some like Russia, China? Like, we don't. That's the thing. We really don't know a lot of things. We're putting so much blatant trust. And we like to think, oh, we're not doing this. We are doing it so much so. If you look at like Stuxnet and other cyber crimes and things of the sort that we've been a part of, whether it be we're trying to like maliciously do something or if it's for like the betterment of the globe. But I definitely think it's just something we're going to have to live with. And as long as we're following these good practices and kind of spread the knowledge, I try to, every time I see someone do something that I'm just like face palming about how like much of a security risk it is, I try to like point it out. Even if it sounds like dumb, it's just like, especially if someone you care for, like a loved one or like a good friend, you don't want their stuff to get stolen. Like I think one of my coworkers told me his friend, albeit this guy was rich, his friend had like $100,000 of cryptocurrency on some like exchange that got stolen like a week ago. And I was like, hey, did he have two-factor authentication? He's like, no. I'm like, well, dude, like there you go. It's you
He
can
had
do everything
100,000.
right. Yeah, but apparently this guy's like loaded. So it was like a drop in the water. But like still, to most
Still,
people that'd be ridiculous. And I'm just mind blown that these exchanges and things even let you set up without having two-factor authentication or like another level of security. I think they should be mandated. They should be shut down if they don't have this mandate. It's just too prevalent nowadays. I like to think the reason they don't is because they're trying to like I mean, you're giving them access to everything. They can literally see it all if they wanted to. You're putting blind trust, especially if it's an overseas corporation or website. Like they don't have to abide by many laws. Like Somalia is one of the biggest places for like illegal server operations and things because there's just no internet laws in Somalia. They have like pirates. Like literally there's just straight up like actual crime besides cybercrime
yeah.
going on there. Like they could care
I didn't
less
know
about the
that.
information. Yeah,
Is there a
Somalia
lot of
is a big,
cybercrime there?
not like physically within there. I think it's they use it as like a safe haven of like laws. Like there's not really any laws in there. Something I've always thought about too is like international waters has such interesting like laws. I don't even there's no global law for cybercrime or defining information security acts of like threats because the moment we do acknowledge that this is a crime, every single person is going to be guilty of it because we all do it.
Yeah,
Every country does it, and we all
yeah.
do it. And what we're just going to be like, oh, it's a crime. Okay, we're all doing a
And we
crime
still
now.
want to do it.
We don't want to do it. It's not in anyone's best interest, especially not ours, and 100% not China. As much as we like to um, maybe think like China might not be like a physical threat as far as like they're not going to just like randomly go to war with us. But I think we are in a quote unquote World War III with all these large countries like Israel and the US, China, Russia, Iran, even's like a big one in cybercrime. Like there's just literally 24/7. You can see there's websites that literally show you every single attack happening in like live, like where it's coming from, and you'll just see all over the globe. They're all pointing at like the U.S. The U.S. is a big target because we have so much stuff. Intellectual property is a big one.
We're so
Um,
connected.
yeah, we are very connected, which can be good and bad. We try to help other people by kind of having a more like open, uh, like accessibility to some of our like infrastructure, like internet infrastructure. Like a lot of the times it's like we're banned from using a site by being in the US. It's not like they're banned from using our site if they're outside the US. Most of the time they can use it. So it's we're being kind of like suppressed to do something else while these other people have like free reign to do a lot of things. And that's a whole other topic for another time, would be within the whole like financial sector. There's some like things with the US government, and the US citizens don't have as much financial freedom as some other um, countries do with US services. So I think we just all need to realize everyone's out there to get us, even if they really aren't. We just have to assume that. Always think like a robot. That's just something I have started implementing, is if I was a bot, what would I do? Like, what would I be coded to do in this situation? And I try to think of personal like methods of avoiding that, whether it be like two-factor authentication, or checking my password to see if it's in these database leaks or not. Going through and off the top of my head, all these like my bank accounts and stuff, do I actually remember all the passwords and stuff, or did I forget anything? Like, I need to make sure that everything I have that's sensitive, I'm able to access, and there's no way I'm gonna like not have access to it. Because hypothetically, if your computer just gets wiped and you had your password saved on a Word doc or something, like, what are you gonna do? You're gonna do forgot password, okay? But in my opinion, the whole forgot password thing is just aids and abets hackers, because it gives them more opportunities to get your password through not knowing your password. But if they know other things, they can get your account. So I think a lot of like really secure organizations are starting not to do that, because even if there's just like you have to contact like a help desk. These people are help desk. They aren't paid like $100 an hour or anything to be security experts. They're just getting calls from people. They don't know what you sound like. They'll just ask you a few questions, and if you can answer them correctly, they'll just assume it's you. So you'll just call them like, oh, hey, I'm so and so. Yeah, I can't get into my account. I tried this password, but I think it's one of my old ones. Like, do you know if like, I think I might have changed it. Like, do you remember? And they're like, oh yeah, they're trying to be helpful. Like, oh yeah, it says you changed it so and so days ago. And then you're like, oh, like I forgot. And you try to like sweet talk them. Just social engineering is the like most prevalent and effective thing, because yes, it might seem obvious to some people, but to others, it's just the best
The
social
coolest.
engineers are just the most genuinely sounding people. Like, it just sounds like a real person who's not trying to like do anything malicious. Um, but no, they really are. I mean, you have those people, and then you have the other side of the spectrum. That's a telemarketer calls that you're getting. That the moment you answer the call, you already know it's a telemarketer because it has some weird beep or something. Um, so it's just like that might also just be a distraction. We see the very blatant ones. We're like, oh, like they're all just so blatantly obvious. We would know. And then you get these sophisticated ones that are like spear phishing, is what we call it, where it's very specialized, especially for like higher ups in an organization or something. They make special accommodations in their phishing campaign to make it very personal for them. So it's like, oh, like Richard, um, yada yada, like mention something that they maybe just did the other day, or like something about their family, like things that add validity to their persona. And they work a lot, especially because a lot of high up people tend to be older, and they weren't around in the like technological boom, uh, like information security technological boom, and that's happened in the past decade or so. I think, yeah, you can be someone who was around when like computers first came to be, and like the internet in like the 2000s and whatnot, but you have to, especially with information security, you have to be up to date. You have to constantly learn, and that's something, even like some of the like older people in my company, they're just always learning new things because it's always changing. And I still don't know who told me this to this day. I probably read it somewhere or someone told me this, but basically, um, defense is never going to be good as offense, because our defense is reactionary while the offense is proactive. They're creating new methods of attack, and they're actively looking for attack vectors, while our defense is just looking how to prevent certain things that we know. We're not really spending a lot of time and money trying to like figure out our own vulnerabilities, because it doesn't really benefit us. We want to stop things that we already know can be done, while these hackers and malicious actors, all they're looking for is that one way to get in. They have no reason to care about um, the company's defenses besides knowing what is vulnerable. So luckily we have um, a lot of organizations that do penetration testing. My organization does it too, where it's like quote unquote hackers, where you hire them to, like try to hack into your system and see how vulnerable it is and write a report. Be like, oh, hey, like we noticed this was like insecure, this was fine, yada yada. But you're basically just trusting the expertise of these people you're hiring. They could be good at their job, but are they the best? Are they going to be as good as this like 12-year-old Singapore hacker who's like prolific? Probably not. Like some of the greatest hackers are always super young. It's crazy. Like
Yeah.
it really is insane. I think I forget which, it's one of these like big viruses that propagated in the internet within the last decade, and it caused a lot of damage. But they basically traced it back to, I want to say it was something like 13, 14 in like one of these like third world countries. And instead of kind of like arresting him and stuff, the country themselves, at the town, they praised him and they like let him be, and they kind of put him on like a pedestal. They're like, hey, we want you to work for like our government, like help us, because like that'd be such a waste. Imagine throwing such a brilliant mind in like jail. As much as yes, it's screwed up and it's bad that they did something like that, it's the opportunity cost
Try.
of, if they can damage all these people, they have the ability to know how to prevent this. They could save just as many people, if not more. So it's a double-edged sword. But I think hacking and information security is in this legal gray area where you win and you lose all the time. There's no way to like have more wins or losses than one another. It's like you're in this perfect equilibrium of everyone is going to get hacked at some point, and everyone is going to be like going to be able to prevent a hack at some point through like some vector they have, whether it be a strong password, two-factor authentication, whatever it may be. Um, it's always going to happen. It's always there, and the legality is just not established, and it probably won't be for. I think it won't be until it actually starts getting to the point where it's affecting everyone's lives like significantly. Like if we have going all out like cyber war, where they have access to like shutting off our electricity grids or like blowing up, like an EMP attack is probably the most devastating thing that could happen, simply because we use
What's
so much
EMP?
electronics, like electromagnetic pulse, like kind of like when a nuke explodes in the atmosphere, it has an EMP blast, and basically it has like nuclear fallout and shoots this like magnetic pulse that um, for lack of a better term, like fries all the technology. Like all internet gets shut out, all technology gets shut off. It just doesn't function, and we use it a lot in like it's a warfare tactic, but not used as common as like regular bombs or whatnot. But I think it's probably the most devastating thing that can happen, and it's not hard to recreate. If you just have like a nuclear warhead, um, and like the knowledge, you could probably create an EMP and literally wipe out like the technology within a large radius. And we rely so much on technology, it's insane. uh, as much as we think like, oh, if electricity goes out, we'll just use this like generator we have. Well, it's like, well, no, that generator itself is fried too, because it got electromagnetic pulse screwed that up as well. I don't know the exact science behind it, but it's something that is very possible. And Homeland Security wrote like a they wrote like a little like PDF like document explaining how we would react to that. Um, but it's still, in my opinion, it's not something we're ready for. Um, it's it's like a doomsday scenario to an extent where, let's say all of it goes out. Our refrigerator, all our food's gonna go bad. Do we have non-perishable food? Maybe not. Some people might think it's like paranoid to have non-perishable food, but I genuinely think it's a decent thing to have. It's all right to have like at least a good amount. I don't think like the world's gonna end and you should have like a whole bunker full of them, but I definitely think if that is a possibility, have just always be prepared. Like it's a common saying, like if you fail to prepare, you're preparing to fail. You just always want to be ready, and especially with security too. It is kind of a trial by fire thing where you only learn, most people learn the hard way, and myself included. Like it's everyone's stubborn to their own extent. They have their own ego and like this idea that they're not stupid when it comes to like their passwords and stuff. Like they know what they're doing, and it's like that's just human nature. But until you actually something happens to you, um, you're not going to proactively go out of your way and be like, you know what, maybe I don't know what I'm doing. So once everyone gets that reality check, it becomes kind of like engraved in them, and it sticks with them for the rest of their life. And I think it's better to start like the kids off young, with all these like programs and learning like technology and secure technology methods should definitely be like a habit or like a practice in school. I know we teach them like there's tech classes and whatnot, but I think there needs to be more focus on the security aspect, because the moment they start using the internet like uh, a lot, their information is going to start being propagated from that point on until the rest of their life. So they know from the beginning, before they like have access. I think maybe even like this might sound kind of like communist or something, but like stop, like don't let them access the internet till a certain age to for their own sake, until they have like, or if, until you pass like a basic security test, um, because yes, it might affect the individual as well, but it could affect the country. Having like our individual people's information, it's like kind of holding, um, you're not physically holding the person ransom, but you're holding their information, which is could be just as valuable to our government or another government. So things are crazy, man, and it's never gonna end. It's always gonna keep happening. Something new is gonna always happen. Um, Maybe tomorrow, every Google account gets hacked. Everyone likes to think, oh no way, Google's too big. I mean, one of the biggest data leaks ever was by an Amazon employee. Like a higher up in Amazon literally leaked everything to like the dark web, the social security numbers and everything. Like it was just some like, I forget her name. She had some crazy online like Twitter handle. Like she was kind of nuts, but she was super high up in Amazon and just leaked everything and kind of like turned herself in inadvertently by like giving out clues of who she was. But these things, they happen. I think one of the more common things too, actually, this reminds me, is I knew a couple people when I was younger, and like when I was just like always on the internet a lot. I like met a bunch of people, and some of these people I met ended up like, I found out a couple years ago, they were in prison, like a few years back, because there's a botnet called the Mirai Botnet, and it's the largest botnet ever created. It's honestly the most simple thing ever, but this is crazy. There's like four of them, I think, and they all got tried in a federal court in Alaska, but I don't think any of them actually got like much jail time, if at all. Um, they were kind of like forced to, they had to pay out some of the ransom they had. They had a lot of like Bitcoin and stuff. They had to pay that to government. But we don't know if that's all of it. They could have had others. And a lot of them got really high up jobs in security other places, because it's kind of like all publicity is good publicity when it comes to like the security sector. Like that like notoriousness. But basically, this botnet, what it did, it used like wireless IoT cameras that like you'd set up, kind of like CCTV cameras, but like ones are connected like wirelessly or like through the IoT system. Um, if you just got in, you set it up, there's a default username and password to get into these, and it's the same throughout. The same model has the same default everything, and I think you already know where this is going. They basically just tapped into every single of the same um, kind of like devices they knew had like these default passwords, and they just brute force tried everything, and they aggregated the ones they had access to and used the internet connection for denial of service attacks by like flooding packets into like certain places and just shutting things down. Like that's how like the Sony PlayStation Network, I believe, for like almost a month. I want to say it was like a decade ago. I remember I was trying to like go on my PlayStation, and their network was down for like a whole month because this hacker group, uh, I think it was Lizard Squad. It was either Lizard Squad or Lulsec. All these guys have weird and insane names, but I mean, you got to think about who these people are. Like, you have to be built different to like really
Yeah.
do this. But yeah, no, they literally were just constantly DDoSing huge companies, shutting their stuff down, and there's nothing we could do. We're just like, it was way more than our infrastructure was able to handle. We never expected such a large attack. But now we have things in place, but still big things happen. Like SolarWinds Orion, uh, what just happened like a few months back. A lot of my clients used Orion, and I honestly didn't know much about Orion or what it was until that thing happened, and I started like paying attention in these assessments. I'm like, oh damn, like this is the thing that just got like hacked. So then all my clients were advised to stop using it. They had to find alternatives, and it was hectic, but it just lets you realize that these things even are like high up, like Pentagon is using these services, and it's still vulnerable. So like we'd like to think they're not vulnerable, but like they are. And even something that people don't understand either is AWS is probably like AWS hosts honestly majority of businesses like cloud operations and like web servers and whatnot. The CIA, FBI, all the three-letter agencies use AWS as servers and like their service. So if AWS ever gets like an insane vulnerability or there's some
DoD.
like some insane thing with like AWS, the entire DoD, like majority of the government agencies are just screwed. And I mean, we like to hope they're really like secure and they're like completely on their ass because it's like a super important thing, but they could be on it as much as they can, but it's all to the effect of the stuff they know. You can never predict things that are unknown, which are like in information security, they're known as 0-day vulnerabilities. It's like the 0th day, the first day it's ever been used. You can actually buy these on the black market. On the dark web, you can buy vulnerabilities that have never been used before. And NSA buys these. Like they don't want them getting out there, so they'll buy them themselves, or like people will buy them and use them against like businesses and whatnot. So it's there's a market out there for like insanely malicious people, but it's just the nature of it. It's always going to be there, and it's just about being on top of it. So it's kind of crazy because we really can't do anything. We will never be able to predict the next step. So we're always in this limbo of, oh God, what's going to happen next? We can just try our best to control what we can.
Yes, and that's not easy. I mean, like you said earlier, like there's no laws out there. This information, like the internet's been around for maybe 20 plus years. We've had software engineers for a while, but like information security, the value of information, data breaches, and keeping privacy private, that's all like new within the last 10 years. And like within the last 5 years, I feel like it's just gotten crazy with the cyber attacks, international cyber attacks. When you see it start coming into critical infrastructure, when we ourselves, like, I know, like 4 years ago, I think I woke up one morning and I had negative $10,000 in my bank account. And I was just like, luckily that all got fixed, but like
Yeah.
that will stick with me forever. It's just like somehow someone just got 40,000, whatever amount out of my bank account, and just that's crazy. And like that could really destroy. And your friend, he lost like $100,000. Whether he's rich or not, that's a lot. If that was someone who's not rich, like that's a lot of money. If it's
Absolutely.
something as simple as two-factor authentication, it's like you and I are in the security realm, so we get it. But there are so many people out there who are so vulnerable. Ignorance is bliss until like you wake up that day and you're just like, all of my money is gone.
Yeah, that's crazy. I mean, the one good thing I think people give a lot of like central banks a lot of flack, and I see why. But the one benefit to these central banks is they are FDIC insured. So when things like that do happen, you will get your money as long as you didn't do anything like you personally didn't do that. You should be fine. But if we want to have this level of like financial freedom and ability to have our own banking, we need to make sure that doesn't even happen if we use other people's services, because if that happened to us, we're screwed. There's no way we're getting that back. We're not insured by the government ourselves. If we had like our own money like processing like procedure, but I think it's this next decade is going to be very interesting. I think the first year itself, or I guess second year, because 2020 and 21 were just one heck of a 2 years for cybersecurity. I know my company itself, like the revenue exploded and just demand exploded because everything's remote now. Like no one wants to go back to work. No one wants to go back to an office. There's no reason to. There's no reason to go in person. Like why would someone, when there's so many jobs out there that are saying, hey, you could be remote. Um, you could live in the cheapest place in the world and work a like San Francisco tech company job and get paid like insane salary and live like a king wherever you may be. Which that in itself has its own problems, because now companies are going to start outsourcing to less secure countries for cheaper work, which happens a lot in software development. That's like very common in software development, because like I think India especially, you can get these people have PhDs in like computer science, like extremely intelligent people, $8 an hour. Like that's all they charge, like insanely low rates. So how are you going to compete with that? You can't. Um, it's the downfall of, I'd say that's probably the only downfall of our capitalism is I think capitalism works well, but it's when there's outside factors, other countries that aren't capitalist, or they're trying to like manipulate capitalism, that's when it hurts us. But theoretically, if like everyone was on the same system, that wouldn't happen, but that's not realistic. We can't control the whole world. We shouldn't control the whole world. um, I think that's why the whole like buy American, like everyone wants to keep everything in America as far as like our industries, because all the sensitive information we just can't, it's not reasonable to trust it with all these countries. Especially China is notorious for stealing our intellectual property, and it's wide open that they're not hiding it. We just kind of, it's like, well, they got child labor and it's cheap, so we'll keep using it. Yeah, it might be convenient, but when you actually look at the morality and like the things behind it, it's really not. How can, like, if you like oversaw that in person every single day, like how could you sleep at night knowing that you're like aiding and abetting that? But because it's across the ocean and you're not dealing with it, just some sales representative tells you like what's getting done, you're just like, oh, okay. But we need to be more mindful of the physical like geology of the world and geographic like boundaries and our internet. um, I think that interconnection between the different countries is vital, but at the same time, I think those quote unquote bridges between the different countries, like internet infrastructure, needs to be extremely secure and extremely regulated. Um, I think, like at least to a certain extent, I'm not saying to the point where it would like hinder anyone's personal like ability to like do anything, but when it comes to like uh, high private information for like our governments and stuff, that 100% needs to be secured. But within the country, I think there should be more leeway. There should be more freedom. That way, it kind of gives, to an extent, it gives U.S. themselves and any other country more incentive for people to want to come there. It brings more value to the country, because now it's all this great infrastructure of internet and whatnot is only accessible to this physical geographical area. A good country has a really good infrastructure for technology itself is South Korea. They have some of the craziest fast internet in the world. I mean, they are a small country, but still, like they're on it. I believe Japan is too. Just a lot of the Southeast Asian or just East Asian countries are very like embracing technology a lot. It's slowly spreading towards like the Middle East with even when it comes to like terrorism, like typical terrorism that we're used to is like physical warfare, like bombings, shootings, things like that. But now there's just cyber terrorism. Um, Personally, I don't like the word cyber itself isn't real, and I
Yes.
used to say it until I think it was a his name's Professor Messner, but I don't know if he's actually a professor. But he's like a YouTube guy who like has all these like study guides and videos that help you get like certifications. Very knowledgeable guy. And one time he's like, never say cybersecurity. Like that's not a word. That's like his biggest pet peeve. He's like, it's information security. Cyber is a made up word, because it is your information that is being secured. Like yes. But yeah, I mean, everyone knows cybersecurity for what it is. Like if I told someone who wasn't like really technologically inclined, I'm like, oh, I work in information security, they would kind of just be like, what is this guy talking about? But if it's cybersecurity, like, oh yeah, like a hacker. Like that's the first thing that comes to people's mind. Is like, oh, a hacker is like dude
Yes.
in like hoodie, like typing away on like a terminal. Like, no. But um, it's I think just getting that like word and like people knowledge out there is useful in some extent. Um, but yeah, I definitely think we are.
Oh wow. You're I can't hear you. Now I
I
think I
really
can
don't
hear you.
understand why it does this. But yeah, I think we're in for like a rude awakening uh, sometime soon. Unfortunately, so. Um, I mean, something just like the I think it's the World Economic Forum. They do like these. risk scenarios and how we would react.
I can't hear you.
I really don't know why it keeps doing this.
Oh,
Cutting,
yeah.
but
There you go.
okay, hold on. I need to make sure.
I can hear you now.
Yeah, I'm just trying to make sure this literally doesn't happen again. Okay, but
Okay.
so yeah, this we're in for, because these people, they do kind of these tests every so often.
Yeah, now it's on your computer.
This is actually really annoying. Okay, I think it's better.
I know, it's
Yeah,
good
I keep
conversation.
switching to my like physical laptop. I don't know why the speaker, but anyway, they do these drills ever so often. Maybe it's the government, or they're shutting off my mic. They don't want me talking about this. Not really.
Yeah.
Like they do these drills on like different scenarios, like disaster scenarios.
Dang, I can't hear you again.
They like the whole COVID thing. They did like one of those like tests like years before COVID actually happened. So I think that like helped people understand what we were going to do in that sense. They recently just did a cyber attack one where like our entire internet infrastructure is shut down, and I really hope that doesn't come true, because that's one of the worst scenarios that could ever happen. We're not ready.
No. Dang, you didn't hear. But even that, like, people think of internet as just like www.com, like sites, but I could go to like Google Maps. Imagine you don't have Google Maps up for like 3 or 4 days. That's a huge life changer.
Yeah, especially if you're doing like cross country or something. Like you need to get point A to point B like that. People forget back when we used to like print out MapQuest and like read it when you're driving or whatever. I mean, like I wasn't old enough to drive at the time, but I remember definitely seeing it being used
Yeah.
a lot. But now it's just like, oh, hey Siri, take me to like Burger King, and it'll take you. But technology exponentiates in how it evolves. It's one of the fastest growing things, and I think it's gonna grow way too fast for us. It's kind of getting out of hand, especially when we start touching into AI. AI is a very, very, very I wouldn't say dangerous, but kind of potentially a threat to, I don't want to sound like mankind, but like a lot of people's livelihoods. Like a lot of jobs are going to be automated, and um, I'm not saying it shouldn't be, but if we are going to go down that route, we need to ensure those people whose jobs are going to get automated have the right skills and the knowledge to know that they need to go find something else. They need to like find out how they're going to be relevant. And one of my professors, one of the things he brought out is one of the biggest like skills that's going to be necessary in the coming few like decades or so is not how to like physically code or like how to do the actual um, like grunt work of like technology side. It's more so being able to communicate with humans that information, because robots can only do things so well, and they can't communicate with humans that well because they're just never going to be humans. They're never going to have the same like emotional responses and things as us. Even though people like to think singularity is going to happen, I wrote a whole paper on this at one point, but we have to let it happen, and I don't think we will. And if it gets to that point, we're going to have regulations and whatnot. But basically, we just need to be able to interpret what is being done and relay that to people and express it in like a emotional and like humane nature. As long as we have that ability going for us, we're not going to be phased out by robots because we made them. Like we have to hold this line of, hey, we control them. Like we made them, they serve a purpose. Like you don't want our computer just growing legs and walking out because it's mad that you didn't wipe off like the keyboard. Like you need to like ensure that these things are under control, especially with all technologies the same way. Everything needs to be completely in control.
Yes, and it's not that simple. Wow, that's an interesting thing you said, like being able to interface between technology and human being, that connection to make people who are less, the layman who doesn't, spend most of his time working with computers, understanding computers, understanding how information runs through networks. They need to, be able to understand that to some degree. And it's like that communication is vital. I didn't real that's an interesting point that your professor made. I always thought, moving forward, one of my top patterns right now is like coding is going to be the new truck driving one day. It's going to be that thing that like it's not going to
really
be
interesting.
like that hard because everyone's going to learn it when they're like 5 years old, 10 years old, and it's going to be like there's going to be some low level coding where it's just like you just got to code in, this website right now, and just boom, and you know, it won't be the type of job it is today, where it's like this high salary, high, you know,
Prestige.
design, high prestige job. It's more like no, it's like anyone can be a coder. It's like if you want to just get it done, it's there for you.
And what actually has came out but is still in like a development phase, I believe, because I heard about this 2 years ago. There's these coding softwares out now that you don't have to type anything, you just speak and it codes for you.
Wow.
You just speak what you want done, yeah, and the AI codes for you. So when that gets perfected, it's insane. It really is insane to think that, we spend all this time like, because a human is like the one we're giving it the inputs of all these crazy um like data libraries and things of like pre-made classes and whatnot that we've written and we've made the algorithms, and now the robot AI just kind of like holds it in itself and it can access it at any time, so you don't even need to know how to use it anymore. It's another one of those just black box interfaces thing, and the more of those we get, like with the whole encryption stuff where we don't understand the underlying math behind it, like no one understands AI. Like that's the one thing too. One of my coworker who's getting his math PhD, he actually told that to me, and I was like, what, really? But yeah, with machine learning and AI, the underlying like something within the function that like actually does the learning process in the neural networks, we have no clue how it works. Like I still don't even understand how we don't know how it works and how we made it, but like I can see how we don't, because we just don't know how it's gonna pick like the next. It's just like completely random. It just has no way of telling us ahead of time, and that kind of leads into the whole quantum computing aspect, which is a whole insane realm. Quantum is going to destroy a lot of our technology infrastructure because of like the security implications of being able to process like both binaries at the same time. Like that's a huge thing. But I mean, if you look
What
at
do you
any,
mean by quantum?
so quantum computing just essentially means it's running like, because computers, they run in binary zeros and ones. Quantum computing, you can run zeros and ones at the same time. That's like the essentially the underlying principle, and it's a lot more in depth than that. But there's a lot of functions you can accomplish, like brute forcing a password. Using quantum computing can be done in like a blink of an eye because it uses so much processing power and can try so many different outputs. I believe Google has a supercomputer. It's in like North Dakota or something. All these like random like Midwestern states, because they use a lot of electricity and they need a lot of land because these things are massive. Like they're insane, and they honestly look like alienistic. Like you see them and you're like, how is this a real thing? Like it's so intricate and just so insanely made. I to this day I'm blown away by some of these things that like these electrical engineers and computer scientists and like computer engineers all came together and made this like insane thing. But quantum is like, it's one of those things we try to just ignore, but it's gonna come soon enough. I mean, it's already kind of prevalent in like quantum physics is like known to be like more and more like uh like it's still theoretical, but it's more and more like applied to some extent. But that's a whole nother like confounding factor that's coming into the scenario that we haven't really prepared for. Um, so it just seems like we just have all these like things that are coming in soon in like our timeline that we're just not properly defending for. So it's, we got to get on that.
We do have to get on that. We have to get educated. Ignorance might be bliss, but it's bliss until it's lost, and we don't want that to be lost too late, or we'll be the victims, like you said. Defense is too reactionary, and we need to be on the offense and be proactive with this whatever it may be, with our own security, with our company's security, with our friends and family security, and just continually like learning and understanding how to, defend ourselves and how to not be vulnerable on the internet. Like, it's so easy, and it being, hacked or getting your information stolen or getting your money stolen, it's just like that's not an option.
No, it's devastating.
And it's devastating, but it's super possible, and we just have to know how to defend ourselves.
Yeah.
Well, Ryan, thanks, for coming on the podcast. I thought it was some great conversation. Do you have any last words or anything you'd like to say to the audience before we end?
Well, yeah. First of all, thank you. I really appreciate you giving me the platform. I always enjoy like speaking on security because it's as we've mentioned, it's super prevalent. And yeah, it was a great conversation. I think one takeaway, if I was on the other side and like watching this, I would want um, to kind of take away the fact that we're always going to be under attack. Our security is always vulnerable, and just always kind of have that in the back of your mind. Every time you touch technology, just think of the security implications, and like think of like every time you're typing in a social security number or something in your phone, or like some field on like a website, some web form, things you type in, just be very conscious, double check the website address, make sure it's secure. Um, you just don't want to be the next victim.
No, you don't. Thanks for coming on, Ryan.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate it. Take care.
Take care.